easier it is to sell souls.
There is a new price on freedom, so buy into it while supplies last. Changes need to be made. No more curbside baggage. 7 p.m. curfew. Racial profiling will continue with less bitching. We've unified over who to kill, so until I find more relevant scripture to quote, remember, our God is bigger, stronger, smarter, and much wealthier. So wave those flags with pride, especially the white part.
We're selling addictive 24-hour candlelight vigils in TVs. Freedom will be defended at the cost of civil liberties. The viewers are glued to television screens, stuck cause lots of things seem too sick. I use opportunities to pluck heartstrings for theme music. I show you which culture to pump your fist.
Let's do this shit. Fucking A.
Happy 2025.
Happy 2025. For those who don't know, I don't really drink. The Rev.
I don't drink much anymore either. I didn't try to stop drinking, but it just sort of happened accidentally.
Yeah, I did. And then I got to a place where I was okay having a few every once in a while. But this episode and maybe a few, actually, because I'm not going to finish this bottle. Let's be real. I don't really drink much. But
no, God, no. I got 101, dude.
Yeah. So for the foreseeable future, Al, the Reverend Al, is going to be brought to you by Jepson's Malort.
This is an important thing to say, though. Despite the fact that we are drinking because 2025 is forcing us to drink, we are drinking socially, which is the only way you should drink. Do not sit at home and drink alone.
Yes. We are together.
Always drink.
Alone.
Always drink with a friend, even if you're drinking because you just need to dull the pain. Dull the pain with a friend. Don't do it alone.
Don't do this.
Don't do it alone. Because if you do it alone, you'll not stop.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you have had an entire fifth of Wild Turkey 101, and you will regret that immensely within a few hours. So don't do it.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Jepson's Malort is a flavor.
It is the flavor.
Yeah.
Jepson's, if you're listening, we accept sponsorships.
We would love it if you sponsored us.
We would
just send us more Malort.
We will drink Malort on camera.
Yeah.
And you know what? We don't make the face either. We're not weak.
Yeah.
We're not weak like some of these fucking people on social media.
Growing up
These TikTok fucks.
Growing up a little over an hour away from Chicago and spending most of my teen years there, I grew up on this shit. I hate myself for it, but I grew up on it. So
That made you the man you are today.
yeah, many things.
Many
mistakes. Too.
Thank you.
You're all fucking welcome. All right. Thank you, Jepson's Malort. So this is the grift, and
it is officially the Trump's second presidency.
yeah,
We're here. It happened. Thank you, America.
yeah. So for those who haven't been paying attention, we are exactly 3 full days into the presidency, 4 if you count half days, and into that time.
Now, this before we get too far on this, I will say this is a slightly different format from what we usually do. Usually we do we break down the news from the last week, and then we cover a topic in depth for the next hour after that.
Right.
The news is the topic.
Yeah.
At this point, because I can't see there being an ability to go in depth on anything else right now.
No, there's too much.
There's too much. The number of executive orders from the gate, starting with the fucking inauguration itself, and Elon's little stunt.
Yeah. Okay. Let's
we want to start with that.
Oh God.
All right. So Elon, I am going to say I do not recall a time in U.S. history where anyone at all got on the stage at a presidential inauguration and Sieg Heiled the crowd and then Sieg Heiled the American flag. I don't recall this happening. Now, you can call it a Roman salute, but it's not. The Romans didn't do that. It didn't become the Roman salute until, what was it, 1748? Some
Something like
some
that.
French painter made a fucking painting, and then Hitler and Mussolini really liked that painting.
Yeah,
So they
Mussolini
adopted
liked
the
it
salute.
first.
Yeah.
Mussolini
They
loved
both
it.
they both saw it in the 20s,
Yep.
but Mussolini adopted that as the fascist salute in
Mhm.
Italy, and then Hitler stole it from him.
Yep.
That's
So-
how we got that. And then everybody forgot Mussolini did it and Hitler got all the credit.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, look,
Which
Mussolini was the little bitch of the Axis. Let's be real.
Mussolini sucked, but he at least contained his suck to Italy.
Right. It was not. I mean, it wasn't
I mean,
until
they had imperial ambitions, but they were fucking incompetent,
yeah.
like in a really spectacular kind of way, in an instructively spectacular way, because we are not living in Nazi Germany right now.
Right.
We are living in a different, stupider kind of fascism.
Yep. You know, and before we get, I mean, Jesus, too far into it.
Right.
Like, all right. One, I know a lot of autistic people, folks on the spectrum.
Literally your entire staff.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost everybody that
Yeah.
works for me is somewhere on the spectrum.
Yeah. We all know our RAD scores. We might have forced customers during shifts to take the RADs and find out their own scores. I have taught people they are autistic at work.
Yeah.
While serving them drinks.
And my one of my best friends in the world is probably one of the most irritatingly autistic people I know.
The autism supremacy thing is a little weird.
It is, but it's
a bit much.
That said, he has the ability to recognize that isn't a heartfelt gesture, if you will. That one doesn't just take their heart and heil it to the crowd.
And here's something.
One gives it to a crowd.
One thing that is uniformly true of essentially all people who are on the ASD spectrum. We live in like a generalized constant fear of being misunderstood.
Right.
Like we never feel like we're explaining ourselves well enough. We never feel like people know where we're coming from. We're always worried about people taking what we say the wrong way.
Yep.
The fact that Elon has done absolutely nothing to distance himself from the perception that he intentionally Sieg Heiled on stage is all you need to know about what his intentions were.
Right.
He's not worried about being misunderstood because he is being properly understood.
Yeah. Let's just kind of touch on that piece real quick. One, as data points, right?
Right.
His first step, unbanning a bunch of Nazis.
Yeah. Like
with
people
Twitter.
who are like people who make like Nick Fuentes seem like a quaint dude, like
Right.
like people who like I'm going to start the Daily Stormer dudes.
Yes.
like types. Like
the head of the Daily
the head
Stormer
of the Daily Stormer was unbanned.
was unbanned.
Day one.
Several very prominent neo-Nazis were unbanned. A couple of them got rebanned for shit that they said right away, but a few very prominent neo-Nazis were unbanned on Twitter. First thing when he took over there. The next data point we've got is the fact that he retweets a bunch of open white nationalists regularly. And his account seems to have followed a bunch of very prominent neo-Nazis and white nationalists.
He has openly said that the ADF in Germany AfD in Germany is the only hope for Germany.
Yes. Now, the Alternative for Deutschland, or the Alternative for Germany, as it is called, the AfD, is a party that has a lot of neo-Nazi ties. It is where the bulk of the Holocaust deniers in Germany align
their
or
whole
are members of.
Their whole political project is sanitizing the Nazi regime.
Yep.
And normalizing it as good for Germany.
Right. And basically,
that's their primary goal.
That German nationalism was not something to be ashamed of. And that's that's their party.
In fact, all nationalism is something to be ashamed of.
Correct. So he did these things, the last one just weeks before.
Yeah.
And then he gives that salute. Whether or not he meant it, let's go and say, even if it was a mistake. Let's just say, even if. Okay?
Yeah.
One, the data points beforehand says he maybe should have done a little bit of fucking media training and practice before he gave that speech, right?
Right. I mean, anybody who's going to get on stage at a presidential inauguration to give a speech should practice
Yep.
first.
And number 2,
And maybe don't do ketamine.
it's the post salute reaction that's the big problem.
Right.
Because he hasn't distanced himself from it. He's been trolling about it. He's making a bunch of jokes. And instead of saying, hey, it was a mistake, I apologize, it was wrong, he is just like saying, yeah, go fuck yourself, laugh at me, ha ha ha, I can't be a Nazi. But he's not actually saying I can't be. He's just saying, well, apparently I'm a Nazi.
I guess I'm a Nazi and a Zionist at once. Ha ha ha. Yes.
Which, yeah, there were.
You are.
Let's-
You are both.
They were both.
They are not mutually exclusive.
Both existed, both still exist. It's weird. So that's Elon. I mean, there's a lot more about Elon.
I mean, and I will say this. I don't know. I will not say that he emphatically meant it in a I am a sincere Nazi who is going to give a sincere Nazi salute.
Right.
But he definitely meant it at a minimum meant it in a 4chan troll, let's trigger the libs by giving them a Nazi salute type of way.
Yep. I can't read his mind, but that's my guess.
That's my guess too, just because he is kind of just an unthinking, incurious troll. Who's also a fake gamer.
Yeah. Now, before we go on to the rest of this bullshit, yeah, fake gamer. I love that.
He
During the inauguration, wasn't he also leveling?
While he was on stage Sieg Heiling at the inauguration, he was also simultaneously in a Paths of Exile dungeon, clearing enemies and hoarding loot.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's talent if he was doing both at the same time, but he
was not.
He was not.
Another fun one, but there's a piece out Rolling Stones. I'm just going to suggest people read it because it's actually really good. Is that
I'll say this: I am heartened to see Rolling Stone doing actually decent journalism again because it's been a drought for a decade and a half.
The Trump years, they weren't too bad. They got shy after they botched that whole the sexual assault one.
Yeah, and Jan Werner said some really dumb fuck shit.
Yeah.
That did not help the publication at all.
Right.
But it feels like they are at least attempting to get back to what their roots had been, where they would hire people like Hunter S. Thompson to do his thing.
Yeah, and seeing good journalism out of Rolling Stone is great. Seeing great journalism out of, again, Teen Vogue, Vanity Fair.
Teen Vogue has been on fire for about 8 years now.
Yeah.
They have just been fucking killing it since before Trump took office the first time.
Right. And, I mean, they were killing it about Me Too and about Donald Trump the whole time.
You can go back to about 2014, 2015, and they were already like, they were fucking doing the good work.
Yes. And so
I'm really happy for that because it's one of the most popular publications among young women, and that's great.
But there was a piece that they got out, and its title it says everything. Everyone who was supposed to protect you from this failed miserably. And that's just it. From the top on down, we were supposed to be, in 2020, it was the stop this moment.
Right.
That was our the Nazis did badly in the election. Let's not them.
Let's make sure this never happens again.
Right. And they had their beer hall putsched on January 6th. And here we are.
And that Biden released a plan to prevent this from ever happening again on his last fucking day of office.
Yeah.
Is beyond infuriating because that should have been his day goddamn one agenda.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
To make sure that what happened never happened again.
Yeah. And the closest that they got was the Electoral Count Act, right? Like making sure that basically the shenanigans that led up to the certification problem on January 6th couldn't happen as easily. That's it. That was the only fucking thing that they did as far as making this more durable.
The instant he appointed Merrick Garland as Attorney General, our democracy became as fragile and tenuous as it's ever been.
Yep.
And the last 3 days, because it has somehow only been 3 days. I was driving around earlier today. I went out early in the morning before I picked up the liquor for recording today, and it hit me that it's only been 3 days.
Yeah.
And I genuinely had trouble reconciling that fact because it feels like it's been months. I am exhausted.
I mean, it's
In a way I have not been exhausted in my life before. And you know me, I became politically aware at an unusually young age
Mhm.
because I watched the MOVE bombing play out live on Philadelphia news when I was 6 years old.
Right.
And I watched Bud Dwyer kill himself on live TV when I was like 8 years old. And I sat through an entire summer of Iran-Contra hearings that same year as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening now is literally everything I've been worried about my entire life.
Yeah. I mean,
And it's really hard to process that.
yeah. I mean, to be honest, we don't expect to be in this. I mean, this current 3.5 day extravaganza so far,
Yeah.
right, that we've got has done more to upend the order of the last 70 years than any two-term presidency has.
Right.
And that's I think at its core. Like let's just kind of go real quick over a list of some of these bullshit things. We have, one of the more like recent rollbacks. The federal government is now directed to believe that there are only two genders. I mean, jokingly, they did it in the dumbest way possible. So it says there's only one gender, women, because they didn't understand biology.
And that's instructive too, because it shows that they are incapable of not fucking everything up, even the simplest things. Even just being transphobic and trying to enshrine that in federal law, they fucked it up.
Yeah. So
because they are fuck ups. And that does give me some tiny sliver of hope, because they are going to be shockingly incompetent at everything they try.
Yeah. But
until hopefully in 2 years, even as feckless and useless as they are, hopefully in 2 years, the fucking Democrats take the House back.
hopefully.
If
So
they don't just cave and give in and fucking, I don't know, try to marginalize JOC more.
That's probably what's going to happen, because that's where we're at. But with that, that's their first step, which means that passports, government agencies, etc., now are going to be like, you know what, fuck you, you are a man, you're a woman, whether or not somebody happens to have a trans identity. That's the first problem. And then we go to the suspension of the entire civil rights division of the DOJ. That means that current enforcement of all like large-scale violations of people's civil liberties, particularly in law enforcement across the country, has now been suspended.
Indefinitely.
All new cases, indefinitely. All new cases are put on hold. Current enforcement actions that they were in the middle of negotiating with have just stopped. Current cases are done. It is just, boom, a giant freeze on all civil rights litigation by the federal government.
And something that I need people to understand is, if you are white and you are straight and you are cis, it is still entirely possible for your civil rights to be violated in horrific ways. And you have no recourse to do anything about it at all anymore. At least not for the time being.
There are cases with the DOJ that don't have anything to do with race or gender or religion right now, where they are still targeting law enforcement agencies. Why? Because things like civil asset forfeiture leading to direct theft, where small police stations and small departments and etc., towns, counties, whatever, have been using you, the people, the taxpayers, as a revenue stream illegally. And they've just been stealing from you. And then they give a bonus to the cops that take it. And so they're robbing straight white people too.
Yeah.
And they're stealing your cars and stealing your cash and stealing shit out of your house.
And they don't have to tell you why or give it back. This has nothing to do with you being charged after arrest or convicted after arrest. They are allowed to seize it and keep it, and you have no recourse.
You've got to sue to get your money back.
You have to have the money to get your money back.
Yep.
Which, if they're taking all of your fucking money, you can't do. And bear in mind, like, just having cash on you is probable cause for them to seize it under civil forfeiture asset forfeiture. They can just like, oh, you have cash. Why do you have this much cash? It's suspicious that you have this much cash. We're going to confiscate all of your cash.
Prove that your cash didn't commit a crime.
Yeah.
What?
When cash can't be traced.
Yeah.
So you can't prove you didn't do something criminal to get that cash. We have stories about this. We have plenty of stories over the last 30 years of people who were driving to buy a car. They were going to go buy a second car and they were going to pay cash for it. And they had $1,500 cash on them. And they were going to buy a car and they got pulled over and the cops found $1,500 cash and said, "We are going to seize this because we can't prove you aren't a drug dealer."
There was a guy on a way to a cash deal to go buy a restaurant. He had cashed out his life savings and he was going to go buy a restaurant. He was going to pay in cash or transfer it to a local bank because he had a smaller bank and he, right? Like he was going to do something with it, but he was leaving one state to another. He was going to buy a restaurant. Everybody knew about it. There was a contract. There were people who knew, right? He had withdrawn the money from his accounts, gets pulled over, car searched, cash taken. He wasn't even issued a citation. It took him years to get his money back and it cost him, because again, he didn't win legal fees, I don't believe. So it cost him tens of thousands of dollars to do it. Almost wiped the man out. Right? And the restaurant that he was going to buy, gone. He didn't get to buy it. Yeah. Right?
He lost.
There's
a stretch of highway in Delaware. It's along Route 1 when you're going from like North Delaware down to the beaches towards Rehoboth. I can't remember the name of the town right now, but it is notorious for they will pull you over and search your car if you're going 2 or 3 miles an hour over the speed limit, hit you with massively punitive fines. The town is basically funded entirely by traffic citation money from these aggressively punitive fines, and they will search your car and take your shit, and good luck ever getting it back.
Yeah.
And that is, you can be the whitest white that ever whited and they will fucking do it to you. They do not goddamn care. They will take everything, and now you have no way to do anything about it.
Yeah. Eventually, the DOJ's Civil Rights Division catches a case that can be like investigated, proven, and litigated over. And when they do, that one changes the system entirely because it scares other departments, right? And two, it definitely changes the situation for people there or driving through there. And that can be hundreds, it can be thousands, it can be tens of thousands, it could be millions of people, depending on the size of the government agency that it's slapping around, the police department. And it's an imperfect system. I want it to have done way more than it has been doing. It's been heavily ineffective and feckless for decades, yet it's been one of the best recourses we've had. And now that it's just been suspended indefinitely. So there's that. Enjoy it.
So we've also federal public health organizations are no longer allowed to talk to the public.
Yeah.
This is when we are on the brink of the possibility of the H5N1 avian flu developing the ability to be transmitted from human to human.
We know a lot more about how it's possible. We know that it's been like on a line where it's been mutating in that direction.
This has been a virus we've been fighting for 15, 20 years now to prevent this from happening. It almost happened in 2013.
Yeah.
It came close to happening again in I can't remember if it was 2022 or 2023. It was recently. They were very concerned that this was going to happen. And
yeah, because we know how it can, we know exactly what would do it, don't we? Like,
if you recall when egg prices spiked a couple of years back,
yep,
that was because it was something like 4 billion chickens in the United States either died directly because of or had to be culled because of.
Yeah, it was a third of the chicken population.
And that's why the price of eggs shot up.
1/3.
1/3. And we are facing a situation now where not only are our federal health agencies, the NIH, the FDA, the CDC, allowed to issue information directly to the public without having it be vetted through an administration official. The system by which ER doctors report to the CDC has been shut down. So the first human-to-human transmission of H5N1 is going to be discovered in an ER somewhere in the country.
More
what's
than
going to happen. That's how it's going to happen. Like, oh shit, this person has bird flu. They were not in contact with any sort of livestock that could have directly given them bird flu. There is no means by which they contracted this other than human-to-human transmission.
Right.
And when that happens, there is no mechanism for that ER to report that to the CDC anymore.
Yeah.
And you have to understand with the bird flu, the avian flu, this version of it, it has a 50% mortality rate.
Yeah.
And to put that in perspective, COVID-19, which killed like 1 million Americans, 1 million plus Americans.
1.2, I think, 1.3.
Its mortality rate was around 1%.
Early. Now it dropped down to like 0.5 or 0.25%, but
Right.
that's still high.
But still high. But like 50% for a virus that's easily transmissible, because the flu is more easily transmissible in general than any of the SARS viruses.
Right.
It persists in the environment more. It persists on surfaces more. It becomes airborne more easily. The particles, the actual virus itself is smaller, so it stays elevated in the air longer. A 50% mortality rate on a virus allowed to spread unchecked would probably represent, not even exaggerating, 100 million deaths.
Yeah.
In this country alone. That's a third of the country.
Yeah.
It would be impossible for us to recover from that ever.
Obviously, we don't have a big crystal ball to know whether or not this is going to happen.
I desperately hope this doesn't happen.
Yes, but this is a possibility. And there are also several other major viruses that we are tracking that the CDC has been very on top of right now because they're of concern.
RSV is unusually prevalent this year. Norovirus is fucking people up left and right. We know people who've had norovirus and it sucks.
Yep. And there's
if you've had what you think is food poisoning and you can't figure out where you got it from, it was almost definitely norovirus because the symptoms are nearly identical.
And there's a couple of others that are actually particularly kind of like dangerous and lethal that are out there that are in small numbers right now, but they're increasing. And the CDC has been keeping track of them. And that's all gone dark. It just, big fuck you. It's gone dark. I don't know why. I don't know what the strategy is here at all. It shouldn't have done. This shouldn't have happened.
No.
And it places the entire world at risk. To follow up with that, WHO.
Yeah, we left the World Health Organization.
Now, it takes approximately a year to unwind our membership. And that's the system. It is possible that an act of Congress could save it, could force us to remain. I don't know whether or not that's going to happen.
I do not even. Okay, so when it comes to Congress, right now the Republicans, it looks like they're going to have like a couple of seat majority. They have
like 3 or 5.
They have the slimmest majority they've ever had. They have the slimmest majority anyone has ever had.
Yeah, it's a tiny majority. It's like 3 seats.
And with him being removed as the chair of the House Intelligence Committee by Mike Johnson at the behest of Donald Trump personally, Mike Hunter is apparently furious.
Okay.
And his colleagues in the House are of the mind that he will never support anything the Trump administration ever wants to do again. So there is a distinct possibility that all legislation will die in the House of Representatives, that they will never have the votes to do anything, which on one hand is great because it means that they can't do damage directly by passing new legislation, but it also means that they can't solve any problems that we might end up facing.
Yeah, particularly problems that this new administration seems hell-bent on starting.
Right.
Let's see. We have so many. The DEI initiatives. All DEI initiatives have been officially canceled, but they're also asking for government employees to rat out anybody that's still doing any kind of DEI work that's been renamed or has anything to do with diversity or equality.
That reminds me, it would be absolutely fucking tragic if anyone were to say, send fraudulent tips to the email address DEIAtruth@omp.gov.
Yeah.
It would be horrifically tragic if that email inbox were absolutely flooded with bullshit.
Right. It would be.
You should definitely not flood truth@omp.gov with absolute nonsense bullshit. You should not sign them up for mailing lists.
Do it.
You should not say, you should not do what I heard someone did who signed them up for email alerts from the Church of Scientology. You shouldn't do that. Don't do
not do that.
Do not do that.
No.
You should not have ChatGPT write you a long, poorly written, randomly capitalized screed about how Clarence Thomas was a DEI appointment and send it to that email address either. And I do not
do it.
I do not know anybody who did that last night.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Nobody should do that.
It would be wrong to do that.
Yes. So don't do it at DEIAtruth.gov.
At OMP.gov.
At OMP.gov.
Yeah. DEIA Truth.
At
OMP.gov.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
No.
It'd be wrong to do it.
It would be very wrong.
I hope TikTok doesn't find out about this.
Yeah.
I promise I will not tell them later today once we get done recording.
Yeah.
And after I've had more of this sweet, delicious Wild Turkey 101 rye whiskey.
Malort. Oh, Malort.
You know, let's talk about Malort just for a second. It has a bad reputation.
It does.
It is not entirely fair. There are worse liqueurs than Malort. I have tasted worse tastes than Malort. Malort is distinct and it is unique and it is not shy in its flavor, but it is not as bad as people tell you. You should try Malort. You should go out today. Jepsons, if you're listening, I want everyone to know that I think they should go out and try Malort.
Give us
today.
all your money and more Malort.
Sweet Jepsons, we love you. I'm totally not going to send a link to this to your Instagram later tonight once it posts and be like, hey, Jepsons, we need sponsorship because while we call ourselves The Grift and we tell you to send us all of your money, no one is because we don't actually have a mechanism set up for you to do that yet.
We are very, very lazy.
There's no give us your money Patreon. We're not monetized on YouTube, nor shall we ever be the way things are going.
Yeah. Even if they wanted, if we got to the number of followers, considering they're all deciding they want to join Team Nazi in the tech industry.
We get to like 100,000 subscribers. We are still not going to be monetized here, and we're gonna have to start selling T-shirts or something.
Ooh, merch. We
need merch. Can we just have a picture of my face that says "Eat my shit and hair"?
I mean, I say that phrase like 8 times a day, but yeah.
Oh god, it's my go-to because
it's my fucking favorite.
There's no one we respect more at the Grift than Diogenes.
Right.
Because I don't know if you know this, but in a rich man's house, there's nowhere to spit but in his face.
Yeah.
If you didn't know, now you know.
Oh, Diogenes. I love the eating out of a dog bowl just to fucking piss off society because people didn't even eat in public, and he was just like, I'm just gonna eat with my hands out of a fucking dog like I'm a dog. Haha, fuck you.
Fuck the entirety of ancient Greek culture except for him.
Right?
They are not. It was not a culture you want to lionize or idolize. They had some fucked up ideas about literally everything, but he was pretty goddamn cool.
I mean, look, we got the basics of like logic, truth, and philosophy out of it. Like, so there's, I mean.
And what have we done with that since?
Oh, so little. So much and yet so little. Oh.
All right, so this is a random aside.
We're going to have a lot of these today.
We're going to have a lot of these today. It's really difficult to not feel hopeless. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to not just dive headlong into despair with everything going on in the world. But it is important to remember that for the overwhelming majority of human history, going all the way back to like when we first started building shit that we know of 12,500 years ago at Göbekli Tepe, at least, things have been substantially worse than they are now.
100%.
Despite everything being terrible all the time, which is true, that when Ed Bermila at Gin and Tacos said that he was not wrong, and he will never be wrong. Everything is terrible all the time. Things are still better than they've ever been in human history overall.
Yes.
And our ancestors survived through worse.
Right.
And they built a better world bit by bit through worse.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we do not just give in to despair and hopelessness and doomerism, we can build a better world tiny piece by tiny piece by tiny piece. And it's hard work, and it sucks, and it's unfair to be the generations that have to do it. But we are the generations that have to do it.
Yeah, and that's...
I seem to remember Gandalf saying something about this in Lord of the Rings.
It's so a couple things. One, my therapy session this week revolved around a lot around managing today and the next 4 years, particularly because, you know, his first term, you know, I got a lot of threats. I got hate mail. I got people who actually plotted to kill me because of my politics. Yeah.
To my knowledge, I have not had that happen, but I don't know that I would notice.
Right.
Like otherwise, like I pay very little attention to anything anybody actually says to me.
Yeah.
But I don't get pushback.
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't get pushback on Facebook. I don't get pushback on TikTok. I don't get pushback for some reason, and I don't fully understand why.
I don't either.
Because I talk a lot of shit.
I get a lot of it. And, you know, owning the bar and leading with my politics and values. And
maybe it's because aesthetically you look like someone people should pay more attention to than I do.
It's possible.
I feel like aesthetically I might be easy to dismiss.
Yeah, I'm definitely, you know, in our microcosm of a community, I'm a somebody. It's dumb. It's kind of dumb. But, you know, in our social circle, like, you know, obviously I'm the core of the community of the bars that we've got.
Right.
And, you know, there are a bunch of interconnected, you know, bars in that community that socialize with each other. Right. And because of that, in that community, I'm a face that people know of. And so that matters too, to a degree. And the Proud Boys were really, really active around here his first term.
And they will be more so now that they've been fucking pardoned, which I'm sure we'll get into shortly.
Yeah. And
because that might be the single greatest betrayal of the American experiment by a president since Andrew Johnson pardoned all the Confederates during Reconstruction. When he's fucking up Reconstruction. And
I got into it, you know, over social media and in person a couple times with some members of the Proud Boys, some people who wanted to join the Proud Boys. I talked a couple people out of hanging out with guys who were.
We do know a lot of
Boys, yeah.
A lot of wannabe Proud Boy adjacent dipshits.
Right. And
I actually saw one of them earlier today.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He didn't acknowledge my presence.
I talked one guy out of, like, you know, he was planning to join, but then, like, the whole, you know, Nazi association with some of their members, like, and I showed it to him and he finally turned away. And it was after that I got a heads up from the manager of another bar that a couple of the Proud Boys were hanging out there actively talking about killing me.
Really?
Right. And then I reached out. I was like, hey, fuckers, you know, you did that in public. You're idiots.
You dumb fucks.
You dumb fucks. So go ahead and bring it. I carry. That was how that went. And there were people who threw things at the bar. There were people who called us and harassed us. There were people who threatened some of our employees. Like
I remember when we were getting several days of very angry and belligerent phone calls because of a poster I made. Yeah, that I put in the window at one of the bars.
And so
I regret nothing.
Yeah, I'm proud of you for doing it.
I regret that I was not there to answer any of these phone calls when they were harassing the other bar. The bar that he owns that I work at has 2 locations. And I put a poster in one of them.
And they harassed the other one.
And they harassed the other one. And that wasn't fair. Like, at least make sure you're calling and harassing the right bar. So the person who made the poster that you're so fucking upset about that you put on Twitter and tried to put on blast can pick up the phone and talk to you, because I don't work at the other place.
Yeah. But It's not my first rodeo. I used to go and troll fucking guys on Stormfront back in the day too. I got doxxed there once. And so, you know, I put myself out there a bit, and it comes with a small amount of risk. You know, cishet white guy, middle class, owns businesses, low risk. I have a lot of privilege.
Yeah.
But
and
there is a risk.
There is a risk. And it's mitigated by the fact that
These people are cowards.
these people are cowards, and neither your employees nor your clientele can be swayed by their bullshit.
Yeah.
And I'll say this. We have daily regulars who are Trump voters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if you've noticed the looks on some of their faces over the last 3 days, but they do not seem excited about life right now.
No, they don't. Karaoke night, they were, that one. The one I was looking at, he was just like in my line of sight. He did not look happy while I was singing. It was great.
No, and I think a lot of them deep down know they fucked up.
Yeah.
And they will never admit this. They probably won't admit this. Some of them might. Some of them might be intellectually and emotionally honest to say, holy shit, I made a mistake.
Yep.
And I think a lot of them will think that, and I think a lot of them will feel that, and I think a lot of them will never say that out loud to anyone else.
Probably not.
But
yeah, so I spent a lot
Yeah.
of my therapy session like just kind of processing that, because I do know that this time around, one, they now have like an unfettered use of the power of the state, right? And
I mean,
the immunity ruling,
the immunity ruling,
most dangerous precedent in U.S. history.
I think the immunity ruling explains a lot of the behavior we're seeing from the billionaire class right now.
Yeah, that was my. I think I mentioned that.
We
to you
talked
the
about
other day,
that
yeah.
yesterday.
The billionaire class could have their businesses destroyed. They could be prosecuted for something.
They could be just
killed.
be straight up, killed by SEAL Team 6. Like,
Yeah.
we know that as far as the Supreme Court majority is concerned, that sending in a death squad to assassinate someone for no reason whatsoever is within the president's rights.
Yeah.
And he cannot be prosecuted or held accountable for that beyond impeachment, which is impossible.
Right. That is what has just happened. That happened a few months back with the immunity ruling, and I knew that we were going to be in dangerous days if any lunatic took office after that.
I would not be comfortable with that ruling if Harris had won.
No.
If Kamala Harris were president and Kamala Harris had that kind of power, I would have not felt comfortable with that kind of power in her hands, even though I know there is essentially a 0% chance she would have abused it.
And the worst thing is, the best thing Biden could have done with that ruling is abuse the shit out of it and had fucking Trump dealt with. Right?
Yeah, like
that would have been
like
it would have been worst case.
It would have
been best case.
It would have been very easy for after the election, or even before the election. Before the election, for Biden to have said that Trump is a threat to democracy, and that as the president, I have a duty to uphold and defend the Constitution, so I am going to drone strike Mar-a-Lago. Yep. Like, he could have done that.
He could have taken 3 members of the Supreme Court and thrown them in Gitmo.
And according to the Supreme Court's own ruling, he could not be held accountable for that beyond impeachment. And we know that with how partisan things are right now, and the fact that the Republican Party is entirely dysfunctional and the Democratic Party is entirely fucking useless, a president cannot be impeached and removed from office.
Yeah.
No matter what they do.
So that's where we're stuck. That's the groundwork we're in. That explains the billionaire class. So yeah, my anxiety level because of what could happen between his emboldened supporters and the unhinged nature of his movement, and now the actions of the billionaire class, the way that the tech industry is completely caving and deciding to turn all social media into something friendlier to the MAGA movement. And all of them are deciding to do it in some way, shape, or form.
The closest thing to a large social media platform that is not overtly, explicitly, and inherently right-wing right now, of all places, is here on fucking YouTube.
Yeah.
And YouTube, I don't know.
Even TikTok just changed overnight.
But like YouTube, I don't know if you've ever taken a dive down YouTube Shorts, because short form media is where the money's at right now. It's why I post shorts. When I make a TikTok, I repost it to YouTube Shorts.
Right.
Because the shorts feed is where you're going to get the most views. An episode here gets 30, 40 views.
Right.
I can post a YouTube short and in less than 24 hours have 400 or 500 views.
Right.
And it's, if you spend any time, I don't care what topic you start with. If you start with any topic and you just let the YouTube shorts play, you're eventually going to be fed the most unhinged right-wing bullshit you've ever seen in your fucking life.
Yeah.
You will see religious conspiracy theorizing. You will see weird incel red pill bullshit. You will see full-on fascist propaganda. And you will see it no matter where you start. You're like, oh, I really like Hell of a Boss. I don't know if you've watched Hell of a Boss. It's from it's from the same development team of Has Been Hotel. It's fucking great. I totally recommend watching.
I haven't watched it yet. I watched Has Been Hotel. That was really good.
I've only seen the pilot of Has Been Hotel.
Okay.
Based on that, Hell of a Boss is better.
Okay.
Hell of a Boss is fucking great. But if you start with just like Hell of a Boss fan-made content, within an hour of scrolling, you're going to get like just full-on fucking Hitler shit.
Jesus Christ.
Every time. You can start with clips of Hassan. Like, Hassan is unambiguously leftist. You can say whatever you want about Hassan. You can like Hassan. You can not like Hassan. You can think that Hassan is fucking ridiculous. He's a himbo. Whatever. Right. If you start with Hassan clips, you are eventually going to end up just in straight up Nazi bullshit.
Okay.
Every fucking time. That's where the algorithm takes you. The algorithms on nearly every social media platform are built to fuel rage.
Yeah. TikTok wasn't, but it seems to be.
TikTok wasn't.
It has just, it seemed very different since they came back live.
You can still game their algorithm to only get the content you want. You can specifically search for things. And if you specifically search for something, it takes that very seriously.
Right.
And it will tailor your algorithm to that specific search.
Yeah.
And it will feed you the content that it thinks you want to see based on your searches. But you just have to put like genuine effort into gaming your algorithm in a way that before it would show you things you didn't know were the most important thing to you before it showed it to you.
Yeah.
There are things that TikTok fed me 6 months ago that I didn't know would be like my new hyper fixation, and it knew before I did, and that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, and my last two videos on TikTok, the traffic on them has been ridiculously low, and they're on topics that normally would have gotten me like way more. I mean, they are the lowest amount of traffic I've gotten to date. And
yeah, I've gone from like being able to make some random bullshit and getting thousands of views to maybe getting hundreds.
Yeah,
and that's still better than anywhere else. If I post a YouTube short, my last YouTube short got 3 views.
Yeah, so
3.
So that's
the same video on TikTok got like 800.
But so I worry about the emboldened nature of this and how with social media acting this way, with you know, the billionaire class just capitulating, with the Democratic Party just seeming to cave, there being no resistance at this time. I fear what happens to those of us who are like, hey, this shit is wrong, right? And how that could, like, you know, both the power of the state and individual vigilante bullshit. And then I remember, because I did not watch most of the inauguration. I skipped it.
If people had not demanded I turn it, if it had not been on at the bar when I came on shift,
you wouldn't have
on Monday. We wouldn't have watched it. And when people asked me to like turn up the volume so they could hear it, that was a hard no.
Fair.
We were listening to whatever bullshit music I wanted to listen to, and it was antithetical to what was on the TV screen behind me.
Wonderful. But I have an annual ritual because the importance of what actually happened. The actual holiday on Monday was MLK Day. And every MLK Day, I spend it listening to at least 3 of his speeches. This year was 4. And 2 stand out for me, as always. Well, not as always, but 2 stood out for me. One
in particular,
this time around. And one was Paul's letter to American Christians.
Okay.
Give it a listen. It is a like fictional letter, as it's written kind of as a sermon, from the Apostle Paul to the American Christian movement, talking about how injustice, economic injustice, racial injustice, wars, etc., systems of power, and oligarchy. And he actually mentions like how a system where thousands own 90% of the wealth, right, is damaging and destructive and unchristian like. And he goes hard at basically the budding evangelical movement, right, at the time. He just goes hard at it, and he goes hard at any racism in the church and hard at any intolerance in the church. And it is great because he does not mince words, which reminds me of that bishop who
that was
yeah,
inspiringly beautiful. I'm not often inspired and just genuinely like, I don't know, I don't even have the words for like by any religious figure.
right.
That was absolutely beautiful. It is shockingly inexcusable. Like, all right, I'm an atheist.
Same.
I have been an atheist for as long as I can remember. I do not recall a time in my life where I could say that I believed in some sort of higher power.
I struggled with the concept of belief until I was about 15.
I consider myself an agnostic because I cannot say with absolute certainty that I know there is no supreme being, but I have seen no evidence that suggests that such a being exists. If such a being exists, that being created a universe that appears they have created in a universe where it appears that they don't exist.
Right, and it appears where if they are a moral creature, that they did a very bad job of like creating a moral universe that we could believe in, and expecting us to believe in them would be cruel.
The way that people who call themselves Christians in the United States of America have unambiguously and entirely abandoned the entirety of the teachings of Christ as written down in the book that they say they get all of their fucking beliefs from is beyond inexcusable.
A fun one I just saw too. This is a fun one. This is kind of, again, an aside, but we're just gonna do this because one, we've been drinking now. For individuals who don't really drink very, I mean, that's not a lot for some of you.
I opened this at the beginning. I don't know, I think we've been recording for like 30 minutes. I opened this at the beginning, and
all right.
I've had more alcohol in the last like 45 minutes than I've had in the last 2 months.
Like the most I drank in the last 3 years since this was at a wedding. I had 5 rounds, right? That was, so give me a break, people.
It was a beautiful wedding.
It was a beautiful wedding. It was great. We had so much fun.
We danced, we laughed, we had fun.
Do that more. Have fun with your friends. Go have fun with people in the real world.
Don't sit at home alone any more than you absolutely necessarily have to.
Yeah.
Spend time with the people that you care about, that make you feel good to be alive. Not only does it give you a reason to continue existing, which it can be difficult to find at times.
Yeah.
I have friends who are actively suicidal right now who come to me, and I know they're asking me for reasons that they shouldn't do it, and it is a struggle. It is a genuine struggle to be like, no, this is why you should persist, other than telling them that they should persist for pure fucking spite.
Yep.
And you know,
sometimes that works.
I've been to that point.
They usually just need somebody to listen to them.
They need somebody to listen to them, but I've been at that place. It's been years. It's been years, but like I've been to the point where it's like, no, the only reason I am going to continue to exist is because it will make life uncomfortable for people I don't fucking like.
Mental health awareness moment. I struggle with suicidal ideation as an intrusive thought.
Yeah. There was a point where
I have my whole life, and I've got about 8 plans and 6 attempts.
Yeah,
6 attempts.
There was a point when I was working at the hospital. I worked at a hospital for 7 years as a pharmacy tech. The 7 years that I worked at the hospital, the last thought I had every single night before I fell asleep was, I could hang myself right fucking now and end this.
Oh, yeah.
7 years. every single day. Them firing me
saved your fucking
was
life.
the best thing that ever happened to me.
That's great, actually. And that,
But by the same token, working there was the single greatest mistake I ever made.
that's, therein lies the problem. But
I was happy before then.
right, I've always had this problem, and so as a mental health awareness moment, check on your homies because oftentimes we just need to be brought out of it,
And we don't. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to like. I mean, if I hadn't had like as much Wild Turkey 101. By the way, Wild Turkey, if you want to sponsor us, I'll keep drinking this shit. It's delicious. There's no fucking... This isn't like Malort, where it's like people talk shit about the taste. And the taste of Malort is not as bad as people say. I think you should give it a try. You will not make the face that you think you're going to make. That having been said, this shit's fucking delicious. This is smooth. This is 101 proof. Oh, are we switching now?
We're switching for a second.
Oh, we're switching now? Okay. All right. Ooh. Yeah, it's medicinal, but not bad. I don't
That is
hate
smooth.
that.
The alcohol content burns my nose a bit.
Yeah,
but it's
that's
smooth.
not bad at all.
No.
Like this whole thing where I've spent like months watching like people drink Malort on TikTok and they're like, "Oh my god, you're fucking cowards."
I mean, my favorite, the Malort mixologist is fun, but that's because that guy he was a sommelier, right?
Right.
So he's all about like taste and flavor, and he spent his whole life and career like being like a wine guy, and then he got
Right.
unemployed during COVID and started doing these Malort mixology TikToks, and they were fucking great. One of my favorites, right?
Right.
But I understand why he made the faces he did, right? He has a very refined palate.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Like, if you're the sort of person who, like, can drink a wine and tell me, like, it's very chocolate forward.
Mm-hmm.
I taste blackberries and maybe perhaps a soupçon of black currant.
Right.
Like, I get that. Like, Malort's gonna just fucking kick you in the goddamn dick. However, if you are someone who just drinks alcohol, like, I'd take this over fucking Rumplemints any goddamn day of the goddamn week. Fucking, I watched people puke Goldschlager
I mean,
with flecks of gold in their puke.
I have puked
And I would
Goldschlager.
take that over. I would take Malort over that any goddamn day of the goddamn week.
Oh man,
It's better than Sambuca. There's a fucking slogan for you, Malort. It's better than Sambuca. Fuck Sambuca. And it's fucking black licorice bullshit.
my 20s were filled with with a lot of two drinks. One titled "The Dead Nazi," which was Rumplemints and Goldschlager, and the other was just called. And I apologize for the name. The name is called The Third Reich. And it was Rumplemints, Goldschlager, and Jägermeister. And we drank them by the pint.
I used to work for a German guy. I was a real estate photographer from like 2006 to 2009 down in Sarasota. And I worked for a German guy who was like horrified when he emigrated to the United States and is like found out we drink Goldschlager as a shot because it's what his mom gave him when he had a fucking cold as a child. He's like, "What's wrong with you people?"
We
I don't understand. This was a dude who had like, he was doing the like 1960s Don Draper 3 martini lunch every goddamn day. He walked back into the office coked out of his fucking mind because he was too fucking drunk to work after drinking 3 fucking glasses of gin every single day. And he was like, "What the fuck is wrong with you people drinking Jägermeister as a goddamn shot?"
Yeah. So I've drank so much Jaeger. So much Jaeger. Every fucking bar in the Twin Cities has one of those fucking chilled Jägermeister dispensaries. So my buddy had one of those that had 3 bottle attachments in his basement where we held these parties.
Okay.
And he fed the lines together and then put Rumplemints and Goldschlager with it so we could just have Third Reichs on tap.
Oh,
right? And we drank them by the pint. It tasted weirdly like apple juice in a way.
All right.
So
If you are not a white person and you ever thought to yourself, I wonder what it's like to be a white dude? That's it. What he said just there is the white male experience in a nutshell.
It's the whitest shit. It is so
Oh,
fucking caucasoid. It's the caucasity. It's fucking real. But okay. So the aside that led us down this very, very windy path.
I
remember.
I'm glad you do.
Which is how Christians suck in America. But here's so here's what I saw, and it drove me absolutely bonkers. It is funny. It was this like attempt to like shame Christian, like, you know, be angry at people who were like, hey, you know, that whole love thy neighbor thing. Like everybody was your neighbor. Yeah, like your neighbors were your family 2,000 years ago. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, be kind to one another. You knew everybody in your town, is how they put it. And like, one, they didn't. Like, Jerusalem was a pretty big place at the time.
There were a lot of large major cities in the ancient world. I don't know why people just decide to forget about this, but they do.
Yes. And two, the second thing with that is that the person that Jesus used in that parable when he was commanding people to love thy neighbor was a despised immigrant that the population didn't like. People were being cruel to an immigrant, and that is when he commanded them to love thy fucking neighbor. He was a stranger among them. For fuck's sake, read your own goddamn book.
All right, I want to talk about citizenship.
God, we're drunk already.
I have no idea how you're getting home tonight.
Whew.
I reject the idea of citizenship outright.
Yeah.
I do not believe that citizenship anywhere should be a thing. I think that residency should be the standard. I think that if you live in an area and you are part of the local community and you pay taxes, that is all that should matter. And I think the idea that you are a citizen of this country or that country is absolutely antithetical to human health and happiness.
Yeah, it probably is.
I think that it is an odious and anti-human belief system. And I reject it outright.
Okay.
And it can, as many things can, eat my shit and hair.
I love that concept. I believe that too, but that's not the system we have, sadly. So even if we acknowledge the system that we're stuck on, there's the is versus the ought problem.
There's been a lot of talk about open borders in the United States, and Trump has issued executive orders to close the borders. We have never, in the modern era, had open borders in the United States of America, and we should. We should.
I mean,
there is no reason.
We did, actually. Sorry.
In the modern era?
Yeah, in the modern era, no. Our first century as a country, we did.
You showed up?
And then for a short period of time, we had this Ellis Island style immigration where you showed up, you provided papers, you got a quick health screening.
They made sure you didn't have tuberculosis.
Yep. And then you
were an American.
And you were an American. Welcome. Boom, boom, boom. Done.
It was not until
that fucking easy.
The Chinese Exclusion Act was what, 1890?
Yeah, that was like our first immigration restriction.
That was the first time where we said you can't just show up and be an American.
Yep.
Otherwise, like, you showed up, you were an American. If you wanted to be an American, if you came here from another country and you said, I want to live here, you were a citizen just by the fact that you wanted to be a citizen. And that should be the only standard.
So the bishop, I got a
Holy shit, that's what we were talking about, wasn't it?
That's where we started.
Motherfuck.
This is why I'm glad I'm going a little bit slower than you and not drinking 101. So
I have not had that much. Look at this bottle.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I am going a little bit slower than you, and yours is a higher proof.
Yeah, that's true.
Also true.
I think I might.
Yours taste smooth until the diesel fuel at the end kicks into the nostrils.
I will regret this in about 4 hours.
Yeah, probably. Good thing you don't have to work tonight, do you?
I do not.
Good.
I work tomorrow at noon.
For me. So I hope your boss is fine with it. He's going to be fine with it. All right. So we were talking about the bishop and the absolute courage that it took to just be like, hey, be kind to the marginalized. There are people who are scared. And the reaction was like very kind of threatening. It was over the top. It was people demanding her deportation. It was the president of the United States demanding an apology and calling her a loser and a supposed Christian. It's nonsense. But that is why I wanted to go into what she did reminded me of the first of the two inspiring ones, but the second one,
Okay.
which ties into my whole fucking why I was talking about the therapy thing, the perseverance that we're gonna have for the next 4 years, right?
Yeah, like
And so
the way I feel right now can't be maintained.
no, so we got to take breathers.
It can't be maintained through the end of this week or I will fucking lose my goddamn mind. I need to fucking find some sort of way to ground myself.
Yeah.
And that's true of everyone. You need to find a way to cope with what's being pushed our way.
Right. And one of the things that grounds me is, I don't know, like some dumb sense of stoicism, some sense of obligation, right? But the second King's Speech, one of my all-time favorites, and not just because it's good, and it is a good speech, but because of how it ends and the ending therein after the speech.
Yeah.
And that's because it's the mountaintop speech. If those of you who aren't familiar, King's mountaintop speech, he gave as they were trying to break a injunction against a strike, the sanitation strike, I believe.
Yep.
And he gave it on April 3rd, 1968 at around 10 p.m., give or take. It was late.
How many hours?
Yeah, well, I'll get there.
Yeah.
It ends with this, and this is the part that gets me every fucking time because it's good. And it goes, well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountaintop, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. And he yells that. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And he walks off stage. He says he's not fearing anything. Now, the next day, they were going to go break an injunction where the police were more than likely going to attack them while striking. And he was encouraging his crowd to take action regardless. And there were a few times where he gave a speech where he said, the cost of one of us is just, that's the price, right? Somewhere around 16 to 18 hours later, Martin Luther King was shot dead. After giving that speech and finishing and leaving the venue. 6:01 p.m., April 4th, 1968. Now, I have a much more privileged life than him, by a lot. I don't face racial discrimination. I don't face police dogs chasing me down. I don't face legal barriers to my existence in any way, shape, or form.
And no matter what we say here or anywhere else, we probably never will.
Right. And because of that, I feel it's my obligation to just put aside how bad all this is and keep doing what I do and saying what I want to say and believing what I want to believe and telling people that I think they're wrong and speaking truth to power and speaking the truth when something is a lie and telling people who fucking hate trans people, gay people, black people, immigrants, whoever they may be, that they're pieces of shit. And if I have to put my body in the way of them at a protest, because I mean, I've had rubber bullets shot my way at protests. I've been tear gassed, right? Like
I've had to run from tear gas.
Yeah. You know, I have been to, you know, about 7 or 8 protest events, as in like different things to protest. And I was out during about 16 nights during the George Floyd protests, the first 16 days that they really kicked off.
2020 was fucking exhausting, man.
And like, there is a risk. There are risks to these things. There are people who attack you. There are people who drive. There are guys with fucking Gadsden flags on their truck, rolling coal and trying to run over protesters, and it happened to me. There are cops that shoot rubber bullets your direction. You know, that is the cost of just standing up against the state sometimes. And I get to be a very privileged white guy in the meantime. So I have to just set aside how I feel about all this and just do it. So that's my thing. But I read that speech. I listened to that speech, and God, go listen to it. It's powerful. Nobody could give a speech.
You will probably be brought to tears.
Yeah.
Like, knowing what happened less than a day later. Yeah. It will fuck you up, but in a way that you need to be fucked up.
You know, and the man says that he's going to do what he has to do anyways. And he repeatedly gave that part of a speech. He frequently brought up the idea that something could happen to him or the other protesters, and that was the cost. And it's not 1963, it's not 1965, it's not 1968, and we're fucking white. So that's why...
Like, the worst that can happen to us is that we end up canceled online.
Yeah. I mean, they could arrest me.
I don't expect... I don't doubt it. I mean, no matter what we say, I don't expect my door to be kicked down. It could happen, but I don't expect it.
Look, my end goal is...
More than likely...
be killed as an enemy of the state, but...
I mean, more than likely, we'll be algorithmically marginalized.
Right.
Into oblivion.
But there is a chance that I will piss off the wrong lunatic who loves Donald Trump, who wants to shoot me.
Dude, if I have to die, I know I have to die someday.
Right.
Someday I'm going to die.
We all die.
We all die. If I have to die, at least it's for something.
Right.
Because my father is 86 years old. Mm-hmm. He was 40 years old when I was born. I'm going to be 46 in like less than a month.
Right.
If I live to be his age,
mm-hmm.
I will not see the damage done by this presidency undone in that time.
Probably
completely.
Not. I mean, it's possible. There's the.
I mean, you just think about like climate change.
Oh yeah, I mean,
leaving the Paris Climate Accords is we're fucked. Like as a planet. And I say that as we're a planet, but like we as a species, the planet will survive humanity.
Yes.
Humanity will not survive what the planet does to us if we keep on the course that we're going.
Right. But my firm belief, and maybe it's a hope, maybe it's a prayer, maybe it's just
you gotta bullshit. You have to do whatever it takes to keep you positive.
Yeah. But my belief,
fighting for change.
My belief is that this is going to be bad, very bad, and it's going to cause damage for fucking everyone, years, decades.
Even people who don't expect it to cause damage for them, this is going to fuck up your life.
Yeah, so I expect that, but I think that there's some hope at the end of it, and I want to circle back towards the end of that because let's go back into the shitty ass news because the news is shitty, and the leopards are watching some of their faces get eaten. Federal hiring freezes. Let's talk about federal hiring freezes.
Federal hiring freezes.
This one's fun. So they froze hiring at the federal level.
Now, we know people who work for the federal government. We know people who work for the DOD. We know people who work for other agencies.
I was just speaking yesterday with somebody who's having a really rough week because their entire job is like their degree, their career. It's all government nonsense. And they lost their another position, like had to change or get eliminated about 8-9 months ago. They had a good savings amount, right? But they have been in the process of getting hired in another agency in the federal level. And it would have been a step kind of upward for them, which would have been good. And they had about 5 different jobs that they were in the running for as like a top tier candidate for.
Right.
2 of them were in the last stages where they were going to get an offer within the next like 30 to 90 days. Okay. And now, for those of you out there who've never applied for a government job, you hear 30, 90 days, that sounds crazy. That's the problem. Is that these things can take 6 months to 2 years to get a job with the federal government. Putting a freeze on them is really disruptive, but also rescinding job offers that were already put out there.
I know somebody that happened to. I know multiple people that happened to, but
yeah. So rescinding job
I know
offers
at least 3 people that's happened to.
Is hugely disruptive because it could have taken them 1.5 years to get that job. They could have turned down 2-3 other job offers in the meantime. They could have relocated because some of these jobs were set to start next week and they've had their offer rescinded. So they've moved, say, to Philadelphia, San Francisco, DC, wherever they moved. And now they've just had their job pulled. Now, that's not something that's ever happened before. We've never gone through this. No president has ever done this.
No, and we're facing a point where what's considered a DEI appointment has been put on administrative leave.
Yeah.
Paid administrative leave, but they don't have jobs they can do right now. And we have coupled that with a federal hiring freeze.
Mm-hmm.
The federal government, the federal agencies that we rely on to actually like do the business of government can't right now.
Yeah. There's every step along the way is getting ripped to pieces. And I don't understand it. I mean, I do. This is exactly what we warned you was going to happen. But if we don't cut it in post, whatever, fuck it.
I know what I'm doing when it comes to editing.
Okay. All right. So
I'm going to stop drinking as soon as we stop filming. I might take a nap. I might feed myself, but I'm not going to keep drinking. Because you know why I won't keep drinking? Because I won't want to drink alone. Because you should only drink socially. Drink with your friends.
Drink with your friends.
Drink with your friends.
All right. So, so very much is still on the docket. Speaking of dockets, the 14th Amendment.
What am the 14th Amendment?
Oh, man. 14th Amendment. One of my all-time favorites.
It's a good one.
It's a very good one.
It's an important one. Even though it's 14th, it's an important one.
Yeah, it's arguably almost our most important.
We had this funny little thing between 1861 and 1865 called the Civil War.
Did we?
I don't know if you know this, but half the country that was full of shitheads tried to secede from the other half of the country that, while still shitheads, were less problematic shitheads.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, they got their ass fucking spanked.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to create 3 separate amendments to remedy the bullshit they were doing.
Yes. And the 14th is probably the strongest and most important of them.
I mean, easily.
The 13th is good because, officially ended slavery except for prisons. So watch the documentary on Netflix on that.
Not a perfect amendment.
Not a perfect amendment. No. The 13th Amendment ended slavery officially except for prisoners convicted of crimes.
Which I feel like might become important in the coming months.
Yeah, probably.
I have a sneaking suspicion that's going to become a thing we need to worry about.
But there's a really good documentary on Netflix called The 13th. And it's very good on how that was used, obviously, to basically reinstate slavery in a way, right?
It only technically ended.
Right. It only technically ended. It didn't fully end. And the South used that provision to criminalize blackness and poverty, which a previously enslaved population would be poor. And, threw them in jail for lots of reasons and then used them as slave labor. So not a perfect amendment, but the 14th Amendment, 14th.
It's a good one.
It
is an unambiguously good amendment.
Yes, it is.
I'm a fan. Have you forgotten the 14th Amendment?
No. I was actually just trying to nudge you into frame. You're sliding out of it a little bit. So slide in closer.
I'm in frame.
Okay. All right. So the 14th Amendment is really solid. But the first thing that's important about it is that it incorporated the states, meaning that none of the first 10 amendments that you're familiar with, that First Amendment, the Second Amendment, Fourth and Fifth.
We know you love the Second Amendment.
We know we love it. But
you don't understand it, but you fucking love it.
All of them were interpreted before the 14th Amendment as only applying to the federal government, and the states could do whatever the fuck they wanted. They could violate your right to free speech if they so chose. They could block protests. They could ban assembly. They could, search you without probable cause.
What I'm hearing is they could basically just be Florida.
Yeah, they could basically be Florida. They could do whatever the fuck they wanted, and the Constitution did not apply until the 14th Amendment incorporated the states. The other thing that's important about it is that it grants equal protection under the law. So we're all equally protected by the Constitution and the laws.
Novel concept. Yep. Sadly, a novel concept in human history.
There's another provision that I think should have been used a lot more after January 6th. And it should have been used to keep Donald Trump off the ballot in the first place.
No, he is unambiguously, unconstitutionally unfit to hold any federal office.
Yes.
Let alone presidents.
I mean, impeached twice. Should have been convicted, wasn't, but he was impeached twice.
Because Republicans are cowards.
Yeah. But to top it off, it says there's a insurrection and sedition clause that basically says anybody who made war against the United States or gave aid or comfort to the enemies of the United States is ineligible to hold office. In fact,
although somehow inexplicably not ineligible to be on the ballot.
Yeah. I mean, they should have been in the first place. Should have been kept off the ballot in the first place.
Colorado did nothing wrong.
Yep. And those of you who don't understand the argument and think it need not apply because Trump was never convicted of anything or whatever. One, it's again Merrick Garland being slow and
bad at his job.
But two, because that actually doesn't matter. The case law is actually pretty clear. Supreme Court, in their partisan political hack non-wisdom, made a call that obviously flied in the face of precedent. And the law was actually on the side of Colorado in that case. Fuck you.
Yeah, unambiguously.
Fuck you, the Supreme Court. We have a case. It was the trial of Jefferson fucking Davis, which was presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And they did not continue the trial of Jefferson Davis. He did not go to a jury. And the reason he wasn't convicted is really simple. They made a deal and a ruling arguing that the sedition clause of the 14th Amendment was all that was necessary, that he was barred from ever holding office again, and that he would never be a force in politics ever again. So he did not need to be convicted. And they cut that deal, and they made it precedent. And there were over 100 individuals that were never charged with a crime, that were barred
from ever holding office
again. There were thousands of individuals that were kicked off of ballots when they tried to run. who had sided with the Confederacy. The case law, line after line after line, time after time after time, basically, including one man who owned a newspaper in the North,
Okay.
who was a supporter of the Confederacy, and his newspaper supported the Confederacy, and he was hit with that clause too and barred from holding office because he was a traitor. So the law was clear, but the Supreme Court, nah.
You know, it's challenging as a modern person to fully appreciate the wound that the Civil War created in this country. That was the most dramatically unpleasant thing to ever happen to the United States.
Yeah.
At any point in our history, there has been nothing more fundamentally damaging or fucked up, frankly, that happened to us than that.
Mm-hmm.
How many hundreds of thousands of people died in a country that had exponentially fewer people than we do now?
Something like 300,000, something in that range, 500,000.
Hundreds of thousands of men died
to preserve slavery.
To preserve slavery, and that's fucked up. But even independently of that, just that many people dying in a war that is purely domestic, is absolutely unfathomable.
And it's all because of the shit we punted on from the Revolution. Like, after the Revolution, there were, like, I'm a big fan of our Constitution. I also hate it.
It's definitely not perfect.
It's far from perfect. Like, Ruth Bader Ginsburg got a lot of shit when somebody asked her, about modeling a constitution and where would you look? And she said, I wouldn't look to the United States. I'd look to newer constitutions like South Africa or other places.
That's the benefit that every other country post the United States has had, is that they've had us as an example for how to do it better.
Right. So
we don't like to think about that. We don't like to acknowledge that. We don't like to believe that. But every country that's come after us has looked at how we did things, saw the problems that we had based on the way we started, and said we can do better.
Yeah. And in fact, we've helped them do it. That's the weirdly enough, almost every country that has changed over to a constitutional form of democracy in the last 100 years has had Americans as part of their legal team, right? Helping them craft.
That makes sense.
Right. And because we've gone through it, we have a constitutional process, we have a constitution, we have some of the best lawyers in the world that do international law all over the place, right? And so because of that, it gives us a good view of things and a good view of how our system has flaws. And so, we did it first as a constitutional democracy and representative republic, if you will. But we didn't necessarily do it best. We're still punting. We're still dealing with the issues that we punted on.
There's no circumstances under which the first people to try a thing are going to nail it on the initial attempt. That's just not how anything works. You build upon previous experience. You learn from previous mistakes. You improve upon them. You do better.
Yeah.
And we were the first. We were the first to try this kind of experiment in the modern era in the last 500 years.
Oh, so circling back to the 14th. The other really important provision of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, it's the one that also basically ended slavery, did as good, if not better, a job than the 13th in a way, and that was birthright citizenship, right? It clarified that everybody born here under the jurisdiction of the United States was a citizen. And
as far as being under the jurisdiction of the United States,
that's where you're about to go. I knew it.
If you are born here and you are not explicitly under the jurisdiction of another territory or country, you are under the jurisdiction of the United States.
Right. There are two categories of individuals that are not under the jurisdiction of the United States.
And this is backed up by 150 years of case law.
Yep, and international law, right? There's 2 of them.
And the idea that we are the only country that does this is entirely fallacious.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's just not true. We created the standard.
Yeah, most countries do birthright citizenship. A few don't, but most do.
Most of the ones that don't are not in Europe. A lot of Asian countries don't.
Yeah.
But Asia's its own special thing.
Right.
They've got a very unique culture over there.
What does that mean? In fact, they either give birthright citizenship or just citizenship to anybody who's like the descendant of the grandchildren of a citizen. Like it's
right.
They're more permissive. They're less.
Yeah,
they're less permissive in some ways. Like as far as allowing people visas to enter and work.
That's why so many Americans, people who were born in the United States, can get citizenship in European countries.
Yeah.
Because their grandparents were born there.
Yep. It's pretty common.
I don't know the specifics of everything, but I'm fairly certain, based on where my ancestors were lived, I could probably get Polish, German, and Italian citizenship based on my grandparents.
Yeah, more than likely.
I'd have to look into it, but I'm not going to.
Right.
I'm going to stay here, but theoretically speaking,
it's a possibility.
It's a possibility.
But birthright citizenship, it's like plain text of the amendment. And the Trump administration just ended it arguing that these people are not. The other category, so there's 2 categories. I forgot to mention it. There's
right.
2 categories. It's really simple. One is invading forces, which are like active military forces, not an invasion at the border because they just so happen to be brown showing up.
The United States, you can't say that the United States has been invaded
since 1812.
Since 1812. Since the War of 1812.
Briefly in the Spanish-American War, but I mean, like that was like across border, not like deep invasion.
And that was dumb.
Yeah, it was very dumb.
That was mostly dumb on our part.
Yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, it was mostly to get Texas. And
which, God, why?
Yeah, right.
And speaking of Texas, like the fact that they like repeatedly like. They leave Mexico and then they try to leave us, and they leave Mexico and they try to leave us. They can't make up their goddamn minds.
They want to be important.
They want to be important. And they are one of our most populous states, somehow.
Second largest state.
It's a big place.
So they want
But
to be
it's full of Texans at the same time, and that's not good.
No. You're worse than carpetbaggers. You're the worst people ever.
I lived in Austin for a few months, and it was great, but still...
Also,
I'm iffy on Texas.
I want to defend the carpetbaggers real quick because I know it gets taught badly in the South.
Most things do.
Yeah. Rich people didn't carry carpetbags. You get taught that carpetbaggers were rich folk that came down and bought up everything. Now, a little bit of that happened, like the coal country, right?
Mm-hmm.
But throughout most of the South, that's not what happened. Carpetbaggers were the best and brightest of their generation. They were teachers and doctors and volunteers and lawyers that the federal government helped pay to come down to the South because the literacy rate among white people in the South was a third of what it was in the North. And the literacy rate of the recently freed slaves was non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, they just weren't allowed to learn how to read.
And so
that causes problems downstream.
And you had like 1/5 of the physicians to like number of citizens that the North had. And like 1/5 of the number of lawyers. Right. So you basically had no lawyers, no teachers, no doctors in comparison to like the North, and a wave of young volunteers who had just gotten out of like university or came from affluent families, like, you know, basically gave up everything and came down to the South. And that's why they had carpet bags. It's because they were cheap. They were made out of used carpet or leftover carpet material. And it made a good suitcase that they could carry.
And yet, to this day, we hear the phrase carpetbagger thrown around derisively.
Yep. To this day.
To this day.
They were in a massive generation of young volunteers who came down to the South to teach you fucks how to read. How dare they give you them letters? All right?
And still,
fuck you.
And still, we live in a country where 50% of the population cannot read above a 6th grade level.
Yeah.
I beg of you people. I fucking beg.
You know,
Read a goddamn book.
There is a beautiful symmetry in the fact that you grew up below the Mason-Dixon line. You're drinking wild turkey, and I'm from the Chicagoland area, and I'm drinking Malort. Like, this is, and we're having a discussion about carpetbaggers and why they wanted to teach y'all fucks how to read.
I mean, it was like three quarters of a mile away from the Mason-Dixon line. I used to just walk across it. There was a marker.
I'm sure there was.
Right there. It's like, oh. And we don't need to get in the history of like Maryland and the Civil War because it doesn't make any goddamn sense whatsoever. It's a fucking shit show.
Like, why did Maryland even want to be in the Confederate? It didn't make that much sense.
We didn't have slavery. We didn't have slavery the way the true South did, but we had this weird, I don't even know, affinity or
there were like a handful of rich guys that like had some slaves, and like y'all were just like, oh, we love Virginia. I don't know. It just didn't make any.
And Maryland from day one has had the weird. I think Maryland more than any other of the original 13 colonies had the weird, disparate motivations between like your rural areas and your cities.
Yeah, probably.
Because we had, I mean, Baltimore was Baltimore. It had the Inner Harbor. It had the port. Like day one, it was huge. Mm-hmm. It was where like a huge chunk of the commerce that came into the country came through.
Right.
And rural Maryland might as well have been fucking West Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, West Virginia now, not West Virginia before West Virginia was West Virginia. When they left Virginia because they didn't want to be a slave state.
Right.
I do not know how West Virginia became modern West Virginia when they decided they didn't want to be part of the Confederacy, and that's why the state split in half in the first fucking place.
It really is confusing. Like, especially considering Virginia decided to shift like the other direction.
The number of like West Virginia coal miners who were like, "Nah, I'm gonna murder me some Pinkertons for my fucking rights."
Yeah, yeah. Like the history of West Virginia.
The fact that the original rednecks were fucking anarchists.
Yeah.
The story of this country has been so skewed and fucked up and ruined by capitalists to keep class separation as great as possible. I'm impressed and disappointed all at once. In equal measures.
If anyone from West Virginia ever reads this, read up on your fucking labor history and stop voting Republican. They hate you. They want to kill you. They are not you. You were not a southern state. You were not a slave state. You split. And you guys had a fucking backbone. Use it.
You are the fucking birth of what we consider the labor movement in this country. You were anarchists murdering motherfuckers because they were stealing your fucking rights and money.
Yeah. Like, y'all had sheriffs have shootouts with the fucking National Guard.
It was gorgeous and beautiful, and you are just ruining your own fucking magical goddamn legacy.
Yes.
Being Republican.
Yeah. All right. So the 14th Amendment, Trump decided he wanted to end the birthright citizenship portion, which, applies to foreign invasions.
Now,
and
here's the thing.
And children of diplomats.
I don't know if you know this, but you can't just overturn a constitutional amendment by executive order.
You're right.
I know that a lot of Trump supporters don't fully grasp that concept, but the Constitution does, whether you like it or not, supersede all other law in the United States of America.
Amazingly, it does, which gives me something I want to read.
Oh, why don't you read what you want to read?
Yep. So, now that suspension of birthright citizenship has been temporarily paused, put a block on it by a federal judge. Now, the restraining order, it's effective for 2 weeks for now.
That will be extended.
Yeah. He is a Reagan appointee, and he did not mince words. I love this. I've been on the bench for over 4 decades. I can't remember another case where the question presented is as clear as this one is. This is a blatant unconstitutional order. There are other times in world history where we look back and people of goodwill can say, where were the judges? Where were the lawyers? Frankly, I have difficulty understanding how a member of the bar could state unequivocally that this is a constitutional order. It just boggles my mind. He then goes on to even tear those lawyers for the DOJ an even bigger one. But he basically comes out and says, not only is this so simple and so clear that you should lose your bar license, and I will probably seek sanctions on you if you keep making this dumb argument. You go back and you tell the president he's a fucking moron and to stop. That is what he said. And thank him for it. And I hope that every federal judge does it. I hope that from this point on, all the way up to SCOTUS, they're like, you're a fucking moron, and if you keep making that argument, we'll throw your ass in jail. And I hope they mean it to Trump. It's infuriating.
I have a feeling
They're idiots.
I have a feeling that the level of unconstitutional action by this administration is going to see a lot of 5-4 decisions. And I think you're definitely going to see Amy Coney Barrett siding with the liberals. She has been,
Weirdly.
I did not expect anything from her, and she has been shockingly reasonable compared to her colleagues on the right.
Yeah, her weird tradcath and conservative leanings come out from time to time,
Yes, they do.
but she still seems to be a competent jurist.
And she does seem to be willing to like ignore the fact that she's part of a weird quiverful cult of Catholics and actually just like judge on the merits of the law based on the law.
Yeah, so far,
It's not perfect. She's not perfect don't ever let me sound like I'm saying she's perfect or even good. She's better than I expected, which was absolutely fucking nothing.
Yeah, with Trump's 3 appointees so far, like Gorsuch seems to be okay on a couple of issues, garbage on a bunch of others. But
I was shocked he wrote a concurrence in the TikTok ruling.
That he tried to basically tell him that they were partly wrong.
If you read his concurrence, it feels like a dissent.
Right.
None of them were comfortable with the decision. Like one of the things about
That's
the
why
TikTok
it went
decision.
unsigned.
Yeah, they did not seem comfortable. Actually, they weren't comfortable enough to put their names on it. They fucking didn't. But the fact that they all but said like we don't believe we have the information or ability to actually make a ruling on this, so we're just gonna punt it but uphold it at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing anything like that in my lifetime.
Yeah. So Gorsuch sometimes seems skeptical of government power, particularly around policing. Sometimes.
Right. Sometimes,
which is more than I expect from most of the people on the bench.
Yeah, there are a couple people I expect nothing from. I do not expect a good ruling of any kind from Alito or Thomas.
Right.
They are lunatics who do whatever they are paid to do.
Yeah. The second that it's like sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised is Barrett. Right?
Yeah,
Kavanaugh, it is really rare. The only time I have found myself being like, okay, Kavanaugh did the right move is whenever he is lining up with Roberts. He seems to like to suck up to Roberts, right? And so whatever side of the thing Roberts wants to be on.
I don't think that Kavanaugh has a judicial philosophy of any kind.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to have an opinion.
No, probably not.
I think he does what the beer tells him to.
Yeah, I mean, and look, he was a right-leaning lawyer for hire for Bush, right? Like,
right.
You know, like he was paid to write opinions that Bush liked. You know, that's basically it. And so, you know, that's his role as a judge. And so he seems to be on the right side of things when he's lining up with Roberts, and that's about it. But you know, that judge wrote that and excoriated the DOJ lawyers, and I'm proud of them for that because they deserve it.
One of the things to remember about the federal court system is that the more aggressively a lower court judge writes a ruling, that does impact how higher up in the appellate chain they view it. Like, if you're wishy-washy or you're like, I don't know, I'm not going to uphold this, they'll be a lot more inclined to overrule you. But when you're like really unambiguous and to the point of being almost aggressive about your opinion, they have a tendency to respect that more.
Yep. Ooh, speaking of respectable things,
What happened now?
Collins and Murkowski now.
Are we not getting Hegseth at all?
We might not get Hegseth.
That's good. I'm going to say Hegseth.
This close.
Hegseth is one of the most unusually bad appointments I've ever seen for any appointment at all.
100%.
You could just name a person and they would be more qualified to be Secretary of
Just
Defense.
any
random person. The drunk at your bar is less of a drunk than Pete Hegseth and more qualified to run the Department of Defense.
Like, here's the thing. Just because Pete Hegseth served in the military and mostly in a reserve capacity for most of the time, but like served active duty.
Right.
Sure. Just because he served doesn't actually make him qualified to run the largest bureaucracy on earth.
No, especially when you look at his personal history. He's
an alcoholic.
He's an alcoholic.
Probably a rapist.
He's probably a rapist. Even if he's not a rapist, he is unambiguously misogynistic.
Yep.
Which you cannot have a military leader in charge of the military when you have a military. Women are in the military.
Right.
Like, whether you like that or not, it's a simple fact.
Mm-hmm.
There are women who have enlisted, and their rights as soldiers need to be protected. And you cannot have someone in charge who does not respect that idea on its face.
Yep. Top it off. He is notoriously bad to work with, according to some folks over at Fox.
He's never run any sort of large organization.
Never run anything larger than a like individual units in the military.
It's important to remember that the Department of Defense is the single largest bureaucracy, not just in the United States, but in the history of the human species.
Yes.
In the entirety of human civilization, there has never been a single organization larger than the United States Department of Defense.
Nothing buys more. No entity. No, like, if you were to consider entities.
It's the single greatest economic force on the planet.
Yeah.
By itself, independently of anything else in the federal government.
That's where I was going to go.
Yeah.
So, it is the largest buyer of any amount of shit on planet Earth, right? The largest seller of any amount of shit on planet Earth, because we sell weapons.
Right.
Right. It is the largest employer on the entire planet. And
it's the largest domestic employer by far.
Yeah. But
like, it's not even close.
It dwarfs all of the others on the globe.
You take everything else combined.
Yeah. And it has the largest bureaucratic state. Like bureaucratic like apparatus.
You
that exists on Earth.
You cannot have someone who can't regulate their own behavior in charge of an organization that size.
Yeah.
You just can't.
For all the shit.
I'm not qualified for Department of Defense.
Fuck no.
Secretary of Defense. And I am still more qualified.
I can barely run coffee shops.
You're still more qualified than Pete Hegseth.
Probably not, but that's
probably are.
I'm depressed by that. You're probably not wrong.
I don't know that there isn't a single person. The dude who like wanders around downtown in a cape, barking at people, is more qualified to be Secretary of Defense than Pete Hegseth, and he barks at people. But he's at least on the right side of history because, as far as I could tell, he's the good guy out of the dudes who wandered downtown wearing fucking capes. Because we've got 3.
We do have 3.
We have 3. We've got a dude in a black cape who barks at people, who's our Batman, as far as I can tell. We've got a dude in a red cape who is the barking dude's enemy, who I think is antagonistic to all of us. And then we've got the dude in a purple cape who wears a crown that isn't involved with either one of them. And I don't know where he stands in any of this.
He's going to bring us the great monarchy.
He just sort of walks down 34th and back. But, hey... He's got a crown.
Oh God. Seth. That's where we're at. We were. Oh,
Phew.
the guys.
No one. There has not
It
been
is a family of iron crosses.
like 9 of them, like a daddy iron cross, and then like 8 baby iron crosses on his chest.
This is where we're at.
This is where we're at.
But so Collins and Murkowski have indicated they're not going to vote for him. Murkowski gave a really good, like, hey, I appreciate all the things he's done for our country and his service, and that's all great. But here are the things I don't like about him, and for those reasons, I can't vote for him. Thank you. All right. I hate that we might actually be saved by some of the like most feckless, centrist Republican women.
That's
ever.
the state of our country in general. Like we have.
What I hate about them is that we have like had to rely on them for the last few years, like last 8 years.
At least, I mean, you can go back to Obama.
Yeah.
Like Obama's first term.
Murkowski was saved something once.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah, it's bad. It's not good.
Like, these ladies are okay. I don't agree with them on most things. They often are just like, yeah, sure, this guy's a rapist and he's a bad guy, but like I think he learned his lesson. Susan Collins is the worst at that.
Susan Collins and her I remember her meeting with Kavanaugh where it's like, I just think he'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think he'll be fine.
The one thing I'll give Murkowski credit for is, remember, she got out primaried that one time?
Yeah.
So the Tea Party went at her hard once and primaried her, and she ran as an independent in Alaska. And because of her family name and the fact that she had been an incumbent, she just won because it's Alaska and everybody knows everybody.
And
so
there's like 30 people in the state.
Yeah, right. She's almost untouchable in Alaska as long as she stays like conservative in some way.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to be that crazy.
And it's Alaska conservative, which is different from conservative anywhere else.
Yeah, they're not as tied into what the fuck happens in the rest of the country. They don't care as much.
They're not as socially conservative.
Right.
There's a lot more fiscal conservatism. They don't like the government spending money, but the attitude in Alaska, regardless of your politics, is like, I'm in Alaska, just don't ask what I'm doing, and I don't give a fuck what you do.
Yeah, they want
That's
to
the
be
Alaskan
left alone,
attitude.
and the Republican image is leave me the fuck alone.
I don't think you end up in Alaska unless you want to just be like left alone. You just want to be left, nobody asking any questions. You just do what you do.
I want to end up in Alaska because that's where I'm going to get fucking banished to after this episode.
We know people who've ended up in Alaska and they ended up back in Florida.
Yeah.
And they just pined for Alaska the entire time. I'm not talking about anyone in particular.
Yeah, that's fair. I also don't ever want to live anywhere near my former brother-in-law. He lives in Soldotna.
My very first brother-in-law was from Alaska. He did a lot of cocaine and died at 50.
Have you been married twice?
Huh?
Have you been married twice?
My sister has.
Oh, okay, that makes
My
sense.
half-sister.
That tracks. Okay.
Yeah, her first husband was a keyboardist, professional musician who did a lot of cocaine, grew up in Alaska.
Okay.
Told me all sorts of stories about Alaska. I know some shit about Alaska.
We'll save that for
another time. But yeah. He died at 50 because he did a lot of cocaine.
Yep. So
he loved cocaine.
We might not get Pete Hegseth, and I can't wait for that to actually become a reality because the guy's a piece of shit.
If there are 3 nominees that necessarily need to be defeated, and Hegseth is one of them.
Absolutely.
RFK is another.
100%.
RFK needs to be kept as far away from the federal government as possible, let alone being in charge of HHS.
And you're going to say Gabbard, aren't you?
Yeah.
100%.
She is a known Russian asset. She
Yeah.
has no place being anywhere even close to national security.
She was taking money from Putin. She was taking money from Assad.
It was what, like, $50,000 per story that she pushed on RT America?
Yeah, she is a threat to national security.
I'm going to say this. You can have as many problems with the United States federal government as you want.
And I've got plenty.
And I have plenty, and I will always have plenty. No matter who's in charge, I will have an infinite number of problems with the United States government. That does not mean you should be a shill for Russia
No, I'm not
under
going to be.
any circumstances.
Look, any problem I have with the United States government will never make me a shill for another large, powerful, authoritarian state.
Yeah, here's the thing that people need to remember, and this is
I
something
might shill a little bit for smaller authoritarian states.
This is
just to
something
stand up for 'em.
that I'm specific. When I say this, I'm specifically saying this to the left in the United States online, because it is a problem for the left online. The United States federal government, especially when it comes to its foreign policy, has committed some genuine, unforgivable atrocities.
Mm-hmm.
It has committed them in the past, it's committing them in the present, and it will undoubtedly commit those similar atrocities in the future.
Probably. Yeah.
Any country in the world that has been any kind of economic power, whether that is internationally, globally, locally, has committed crimes against humanity, and you should not just assume that because they are not the United States, they are not still bad guys themselves.
I can't think of a state that hasn't committed crimes against humanity in some way.
In the overwhelming majority of global conflicts in the last 100 years, everybody's been wrong.
Yeah. And
there are cases where that's not true, but for the most part, everybody has committed atrocities. Everybody has done things that are genuinely, infinitely unforgivable. And just because one country does a thing that you're aware of doesn't excuse other countries from doing anything else.
Yeah. I mean, some of my favorite, like, dumb shit left-wing takes about, like, you know, X country good because America bad or whatever, are the ones about, like, you know, fucking super almost quasi-anarchist or, like, anarchist-adjacent left-wing dipshits who fucking, you know, dress as fucking crust punks and talk about how great China is.
I cannot imagine who you might be talking about right now.
There's more than one example, but I've had a few.
I could name names, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah, we're not gonna name names, but I've
wouldn't know them anyway. I mean, honestly, anybody who listens to us probably would know who we're talking about.
Yeah, but also the thing
is,
is,
we don't need to name names.
Like I lived in Asheville, so I know more than one name. Right?
Yeah.
Even 20 years ago, Asheville was Asheville.
Yeah, where I grew up, I
overdosed there twice.
I was the most leftist person where I grew up, so
yeah.
I don't have a lot of names from back in the day before I moved here.
But that being said, like the same type of folk who talk about how, you know, fucking U.S. bad compared to China,
yeah,
you know, and we'll be like China great, could never survive doing the shit posting they do in China. Like their social media profiles would just get them thrown in prison.
That's even with knowing that as a Westerner, say they were a Westerner who moved to China, they still have more freedoms than the average Chinese citizen.
Oh, yeah.
As a Westerner, they are granted more freedoms. They are granted more liberties. They have far more latitude in the bullshit they could do in China as opposed to someone who was born there and raised there and Chinese.
Because the Chinese government doesn't want the shit show of dealing with an outside government, like demanding their return or the press that it would generate.
And China's not stupid. Like China is very good about keeping its real oppressive bullshit internal.
Yep. And keeping it kind of quiet.
Yeah.
And, you know, and subtle. Again, like their population is smarter than us in some ways because, you know, like we were talking about with the TikTok and Red Note shit, right? Yeah. Like people go over to Red Note and all of a sudden the Chinese are really confused. They're like, wait, it's real that you have to pay for ambulances? We thought that was just our government telling us some bullshit.
Yeah, it is. It is.
They honestly, they actually understand they're being propagandized too.
Yeah.
And they just like, it's a weird social because we don't Asian culture and its whole like, you do things
that's
for
like
face.
We don't get a lot of information internally from North Korea.
Right.
I am sure the North Korean people understand they are being propagandized to more by their government than we understand we are being propagandized to by ours.
Yeah, more than likely. Like there's I'm no giant expert on Asian affairs or culture, right? But the things that I have picked up are that like there's a whole like that's some of the keys between like
You
Western-
dropped your malort.
I dropped my malort. That some of the differences like Western and Eastern philosophy are about like collectivism versus
Yeah,
individualism.
I've probably read more Eastern than Western philosophy.
Yeah,
Like as far as like actual philosophical tests, I've read
A
far more Eastern philosophy
a
than
lot
Western
more
philosophy.
Western philosophy, but I've read a fair amount of Eastern philosophy, and
I took an entire course in it in college, just in Eastern.
but it's clearly
philosophy.
more socially specific, like
There's
communally and collectively.
There is a lot
specific.
more. There's a lot more focus on your place in the community,
Right, and your
and
family's
how
place in
your-
that community.
your obligations to your community.
Right.
There's a lot less focus on individualism and like
Yeah.
you as an island amongst yourself.
Right.
That's
And that can do a lot of heavy lifting for an authoritarian state to not have to be all that authoritarian, even though it is authoritarian, right? They could put,
no. It feels like the overwhelming majority, at least from the outside, it feels like the most of the people who live in China are like happy to be there.
yeah.
And
they're just like, this is just how things are because
Yeah.
we're Chinese, right?
and China is still, despite being an economic powerhouse globally, is still a developing economy.
Yeah.
They're not done yet.
Yeah. But Westerners, like, here's the thing, is every once in a while, the concept of the island among yourself or individual liberties crops up among some Chinese group or person,
Yeah.
right? Or some Western philosophy creeps in, or some fucking CIA bullshit creeps in, right? Or some fucking ideas because they got a hold of a VPN and they watch some fucking, YouTube videos on PragerU or whatever, right? Like,
Don't do that, regardless of whether you have a VPN, by the way.
yeah, don't.
Never.
But let's just say, and yeah, they will go start posting and saying some things that get them arrested, and they get arrested. That's just how China works.
Yeah.
Right?
It is more.
More repressive than here.
It's more overtly and openly repressive.
Yes.
Our repression is quiet and hidden
Yeah.
and algorithm based. Like, you're not necessarily fed the information that you need.
Mhm.
You're fed the information that they want you to have.
Yeah.
And you don't see it directly.
And China did a really good job with its big, great firewall,
Yeah.
so it keeps most of the internet out.
You're less likely to be arrested for it here.
Yes. You got to say some shit. Like,
If you don't.
I would like to kill this bottle of Malort
Yeah.
over a few episodes,
Yeah, if
which
you-
has nothing to do with the President of the United States.
Yeah, if you don't.
Dear Secret Service, leave me alone.
If you don't openly advocate for assassination, you're okay here.
Right. Now, I will say that I will...
In terms of what you say, now in terms of what you see,
I will covertly advocate for the assassination of some people. You know who I'm talking about. Elon.
So
Zuckerberg.
I feel like it's important to talk about violence.
Mm.
God.
God.
Violence is unfortunate. Violence is always tragic. Like, you don't want to have to engage in violence.
Mm-hmm.
Being violent isn't something that no one should ever want to have to do.
Right.
There is a point, however, where nonviolence is no longer an option.
Okay.
And you have to start to look at all of the possible means by which you can affect change.
Fair. I think that that's fair. I saw actually this great video the other day about Luigi Mangione,
Our baby boy.
our baby boy.
Our sweet baby boy.
Dear sweet Luigi.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. But here's the thing about him. He's a conventionally attractive white guy.
Yeah, no. I mean, he needs to, like, do something about his eyebrows, but he's a good-looking dude.
Yeah. But he's a conventionally, like, just
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like, the small tidbits here and there.
And
Differences,
he's
right?
fucking ripped.
Yeah, he's ripped, but he's conventionally attractive white male. Right?
Yeah.
And he's getting a lot of love.
Mhm.
Now, it would take Denzel Washington to kill a CEO, or take Idris Elba to kill a CEO.
Mhm.
Tay Diggs, maybe, right? To kill a CEO.
Mhm.
For the American population to get behind it.
That's fair.
Like Luigi got
We
a
are
huge amount of support right out the gate.
We are weirdly visually superficial.
Visually superficial and visually a little bit racist, right?
Yeah,
and I
if
don't mean that in a bad way. Like, here, dear fucking white people out there, right? All fucking 30 of you watching this video.
And my fellow
until
honkies.
My
My crackalackas.
my fellow crackers. Like, we have implicit racial biases that are triggered based on fucking different weird parts of our subconscious of our brain.
We didn't ask for this.
It happens. We have no control over it.
Society implants this in us without even trying.
Right. And I saw a comedian make some jokes about, like, you know, like how people who look like, he was talking about how like Asians will hate on other Asians even if they look like them, and it's great, right? You know, like, but like white people, like, you know, their racism is worse because it's just like, oh, you look different from me, which they're like, look, we understand that, right? It's like, all right, yeah, like, look, we are apes, right?
Dumb, hairless apes.
We're dumb, hairless apes, and so some dumb part of our wiring can look at something that doesn't look like us and have a slightly different, like, relational positioning within our moral landscape, right? I can accept that. It's dumb, it's stupid, it's immoral, and you should fight against the impulse. But, dear white people, you've got it. I've got it. We've got it. Like, there's another comedian I watched. It's like, you know, white people will be afraid to be racist, and they'll see 20 black guys walking their way in the part of town they don't belong in, and they won't run. It's like, okay, fair. Like, and he's like, feel guilty, run. I'm like, you know what? Actually, probably fair. If it's a part of town you don't belong in, you see a bunch of black guys walking your way, and you're a white guy in a part of town you don't belong in, go the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, because the fact of the matter is, you have to ask yourself the question of, why don't I belong here?
Right. You know,
why don't you belong there?
The socioeconomic class racial struggles of the dominant culture led to a division. And look, we don't know how much of, like, you look different, therefore I slightly fear you is natural, because we can't suss that out from all the culture.
No, because we've been too busy developing civilization around the idea for the last 15,000 years.
Yeah.
Some of it is definitely like just knee-jerk biological reaction to outgroup bias.
Right.
And still, that doesn't mean it's healthy. It's
No.
just natural. Like, natural can be unhealthy.
Right. Chimps and dolphins rape.
Dolphins in particular.
Oh, yeah. Chimps commit murder.
I remember watching in 9th grade biology class, we watched this video about, there was this war between a group of baboons and a group of chimps.
Mm-hmm.
The baboons, when the chimps were out foraging, went into the chimp village, so to speak, and they ate all the chimp. They stole all the fruit from the chimps had fucking gathered.
Okay.
And they stood at the periphery of their border between the two of them. They ate all of the fucking fruit in front of the chimps.
Mm-hmm.
And the next time the baboons went out to forage, the chimps went into the baboon area, and they stole all the baboon babies, and then they sat at the periphery and ate their fucking children.
Yeah. You know,
Chimps are fucked up, and we are their shittier fucking cousins.
we are their shittier cousins. Also, by the way, another cool thing about chimps. I want to actually. This is totally non-related,
Okay.
but fuck it.
This entire episode's gone fully off the rails anyway, so who the fuck cares?
Brought to you by Malort.
Jepson's Malort, sponsor us. Await my message in your Instagram email inbox.
But different various groups of chimps, women, the female chimps, will avenge murders or assaults. And so, like, this male chimp attacked a male that was, like, friendly with the female chimps in a more matriarchal
Chimp group.
clustering of
Yeah.
chimp group. Because weirdly enough, they don't evenly align matriarchal or patriarchal. It really varies.
Yeah, I remember.
You hear that bullshit.
I
again
remember
because
hearing about a group of chimps where, like, for a generation, every adult male died.
Mhm.
So the female chimps took over, keeping the group together. And that all of the male chimps who were born subsequently were subservient to the female chimps.
Yeah.
And they developed their own little matriarchal society to the point where if an outsider came in from the outside,
Mhm.
they were forced to conform to the social hierarchy that had developed matriarchally
Yeah.
in that group.
Chimps are fucking cool because actually insiders and outsiders happen. Like they have migration.
You
Like-
need gene transfer between groups. You can't just stay incestuous forever. You need to, like, kick people out and bring people in,
Exactly.
chimp-wise.
So that happens, and each one has slightly different social dynamics, and the males and females diverge as to who is like more dominant as far as the leadership goes. There is no like biological certainty to this, right? Like it's mostly male dominant, but it's not universally male dominant.
No.
But even in male dominant chimp societies, this will happen as well, where in one group, the lead or alpha chimp, say, will have murdered a young child chimp,
Mhm.
right? Baby chimp.
Yeah.
Because they got angry at it for whatever reason.
They just felt like being thick.
There have been instances where all of the female chimps got together and beat that male to death.
Good.
And they do it
Fuck
frequently.
him.
And it turns out that chimps often,
Mhm.
frequently seek retribution for the death of one of their own, even among their own social circles. So, like, that whole idea that the alpha male just goes and beats around whatever they want and they get whatever they want. Like, if they use violence to force the social group to do whatever they want, either the group just leaves them or they'll just beat them to death one night. Just get together and be like, oh, you're sleeping. All of us come and beat you to death.
That's
like,
fair.
Right.
It's
And
like it's like in fucking Full Metal Jacket when they beat him with fucking socks full of soap.
Exactly. And it's like, look, these things aren't hard and fast. There's no such thing as a fucking alpha among humans. Like, this is nonsense.
I mean, as far as we can tell, there's actually, in the wild, there's no such thing as an alpha among anything.
No, like, there's something that is strong enough and capable enough to lead at the time that it does.
Until it's not.
In a parasocial group of a mammalian species. That's it. That's all there is to it. And yeah, until it's not capable for whatever reason. And it turns out that all mammals like have some level of cognitive ability, right? So, some of them are just more emotionally intelligent and some of them are just more like logically intelligent. Some of them are better problem solvers. Some of them are just more violent and stronger, right? And whatever like arrangement of those things that they have in their social hierarchy that makes them able to lead, they utilize
Until they can't. And then they lose.
Yeah. So you biological determinists out there, guess what?
You should probably go fuck yourselves.
You're fucking wrong. We've been at this for 2 hours and we suck. We're drunk. The country is burning to the ground.
Things will get worse, but if you put the effort in and you take care of the people closest to you and you take care of your local community, your friends, your family, your neighbors, you can get through this and you don't have a choice. We have to persevere. There is no victory in giving up.
Yeah, here's the thing. First off, most of you who are going to be listening to this, the fucking 6 to 30 of you, are the type of people who care. You can't not look away.
Yeah.
You can't look away. I can't look away. I mean, we do this so that you don't have to look as much, but you're not going to look away. So do it. Do it for your community. Do it for people you love. Pay attention for people you love. Look out to your friends and your coworkers and your family and those that you love and your chosen family, because your family sucks. And if they're a bunch of MAGA conservatives or whatever, fuck them too.
If everybody took care of the people who meant the most to them, even like if it's only 5 to 10 people. If everybody did that,
Mhm.
none of us would have to worry about anything.
Right.
Every single thing that's happening right now in the world is a choice that we collectively made as a species, and we can make different choices.
Yeah.
This
And so-
doesn't have to be how things are.
And so take care of one another, take care of each other. You know, pay attention as best you can. And
Never trust a billionaire.
yeah. And if the feds are coming for those that you love, take care of the problem. This has been The Grift. Have a great night.